Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Will Radio Part 31, Writing, Reading, and Taking Better Care of Myself. Hope you're doing well. Still getting used to having my big monitor. Okay. This is episode 200 or 0200 of my guide to programming languages, programming, computation, and what have you. I guess this largely fits in the what have you category. So that's, June 28th, 2026, the 200th episode. By some random count, I probably have more I forgot how to talk. It's been a while since I made one of these videos. I'm not sure what the actual count is. Okay, so I created 200 folders for my sort of new round of YouTube videos, and new meaning, I don't know, as of a couple years ago when I started making videos again. And I think my count got off by some, so probably not really 200, but by the way I'm counting, it's the 200th. Now, originally, I was going to do a kiloTube of videos, 1,024 videos in, well, not even a full year. And that was going to be like 3 or 4 videos a year, and I was doing that for a while, and then for various reasons, I stopped trying, largely due to noise, due to the necessity of making noise, making the videos, and kind of anytime you're in an environment where you're living with other people, there can be noise in the environment. That's why I have a mic that really only picks up sounds very close to it. Had to switch from a condenser mic to, what's this, a dynamic mic? I forget. But the other part is just making the video makes a certain amount of noise. And so in any case, so I stopped trying to make so many videos, but 200th. So, not 1,024, but that's okay. I actually haven't been making videos too often recently, partly because I've been doing other sort of creative things, mostly focused on writing, trying to bootstrap my writing, or bootstrap myself as a writer, I guess. It's like I'm trying to turn myself from an author into a writer. I'm a published author. I've got co-author credits on 2 MIT Press books, and I have a PhD dissertation and stuff like that. However, it's not like I was writing every day. It was sort of, I would write with necessity, or if I was on a project with other people, but I wasn't writing for fun. I wasn't writing on a regular basis. I was, very much binge writing. It's like papers due. Okay, I'll do some writing, sort of reluctantly at the last minute, probably, that kind of thing. So what it really means, I'm trying to turn myself from someone who has released some things over 20 years to someone who writes every day. It's a different mindset. So anyway, haven't been making as many videos recently. I think my last one was in the May or something. I don't know. I guess I'm releasing maybe one a month at most, one every 2 months or something. Not that often. I might start making them more often. I guess another thing that was happening is I was trying to do series, and other than the Will Radio, which is just kind of when I when I feel like giving an update or talking about stuff, when I feel like I have something interesting to share or something I just want to talk about. Other than that, there were these kind of themes, like I wanted to talk about Scheme and go through the Scheme report, or talk about Minicanren, or talk about research or whatever. And for all of those things, they're all fine. But what I'd find invariably is that if I went too long between making the episodes, I would kind of lose track of things, and then I'd have to spend a lot of time sort of reconstructing where I was, and maybe have to go back and watch some of my older videos, and I'd be like, oh man, that wasn't a very, very good. I guess in general, I didn't really have a plan. I hadn't planned it all out, right? I guess it's sort of like watching a TV series where the people who wrote the series are like, yeah, well, we've got the beginning and we'll figure out the rest as we go, versus I guess what's more of the trend now is like, okay, this is going to be exactly 5 seasons and we know exactly what the last episode will be. And, we've got these arcs and all that. So part of the writing that I've been thinking about in relation to the videos is I would actually like to get to the point where I have more structure for a series. And there's a series of videos that I'm thinking about making, but I want to do some writing first and kind of get some more structure and try to figure out like what I want to do before trying to bite off something like a series. It's like George R.R. Martin's writing advice. He's done this a Song of Fire and Ice, or the Game of Thrones, that he's still working on. And his advice to someone who's just getting started is like, write a short story or a couple of short stories. Don't start with like a 7-volume epic as your first bit of fantasy writing. So it's the same thing here. It's like, I don't need to have 4 series going on at once, where I'm just kind of doing it by every single one by the seat of my pants. I think if I were to do another series, which I would like to have some more structure and know what I'd like to do, and then make one a week or something like that. Or maybe I do one a day for a relatively short period of time, but do it sort of more intensely or on a schedule. Or maybe I create all the videos at once and then I release them, something like that. I'm not sure, but I'd like to be a little more deliberate. That's something that I found from trying to make a lot of videos, is that it kind of fizzle in the middle. Now, my writing would also often has fizzled in the middle and try to write anything longer than sort of a relatively short paper. But I'm working on that. So I'll talk a little bit in this epi about what I'm thinking with writing and kind of what am I doing with writing, what I think I've learned. So the main topics, writing, reading, taking better care of myself. There are also just some miscellaneous things that don't fit into that, having to do with, Japanese or watching an 80s TV show. I also got BritBox. I just remembered this. I subscribed to BritBox from the BBC, and I've been watching with family this Friday night dinner series, which is kind of absurd but pretty funny. I've been enjoying that. BritBox only seems to have 2 seasons, but there are more seasons than that. I think 6 seasons. All right. And every episode of that was written by one person. That's pretty impressive writing. Oh, so in the past, I had said that I wanted to lose weight, the previous epi, and someone put a comment like the Hunger Games. Now I'm much more serious about getting in better shape and taking care of myself. The doctor's like, yeah, you need to knock off the milkshakes and the pizza all the time and start exercising and just eat healthier and lose a significant amount of weight. So I'm working on that. So I've lost 10, 11 pounds since the doctor said that, but I want to lose like another 30 probably. Try to get back to after grad school when I was doing the couch to 5K, jogging and climbing 3 or 4 times a week, that sort of thing. That's probably the peak physical conditioning I've been in, since I was a teenager or whatever. So I'm taking this very seriously. Doctor's orders. I'm eating much more healthy. I'm looking at the nutrition information on everything I eat, or at least I try to. Can't do that 100% of the time if I'm eating out or something, but I'm developing sort of my spidey sense of, okay, this one seems suspicious, or and we're like, yeah, it seems okay. It doesn't have too much sodium, but the saturated fat's off the roof, or through the roof or something. So trying to do something a little Mediterranean diet-like, but definitely modified. So getting used to that, but a lot of it's just getting used to the taste. It's like Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller, who lost a lot of weight. And he said that, I remember this interview with him where someone asked him, is it true that you can eat anything you want on your diet? And he said, yes, it is true. However, you have to understand that what I want to eat has changed. So I'm trying to get into that phase, that what I want to eat. And so I'm not drinking any sugary drinks. That was a big part of what my source of calories, or just like snacking on candies and chocolates and stuff throughout the day, all those sorts of things. So I'm just much more aware, and it's like, okay, let me try a salad. Let me try one of these bowls, like a kava type grain bowl or something, which in the past, if someone presented that to me, it'd be like, oh my gosh. And I still kind of have that reaction initially, but then I'll start eating. It's like, actually, this is not bad. It's kind of tasty in a way. So I'm just trying to change my sense of taste. And when I became vegetarian, I had to do that. And I became much more open to eating. So that's what's happening now. It's like, in some sense, I've closed off a lot of foods and a lot of things I used to eat, just like when I became vegetarian. But now it also opens a lot of things I wouldn't have touched before. So choosing to eat different things and losing weight, I'm just, eating less. Paying attention, using a scale every morning. It can kind of go up and down a little bit, but the trend is in the right direction. And a trick that I learned was, like black coffee. So I have developed a taste for coffee over the years. So just black coffee, or just like with a tiny splash of creamer or milk or something. But pretty much black coffee. It's only got like 5 calories or something. And also there are these drinks that, there are a bunch of different brands. They're effectively sparkling water with a tiny bit of natural flavoring, like Spindrift is one of them. I know there are other brands, and those have like 5 calories or something and no added sugar. So for drinks, I've replaced all the sodas and milkshakes and everything else, sweet teas and lemonades and all that stuff, pink lemonade. If someone gave me a glass of pink lemonade right now, I'd be, I'd probably be offended. And then exercising. I'm actually exercising every day. And I've joined a gym, been going to the gym. Schedule-wise, it could be a little tricky. I've been doing like bicycle courses, riding courses, spin classes, whatever they call it. And also I've done one high-intensity training, which almost ended me. That was going to take some time. But now at home, have a recumbent exercise bike. So if I can't get to the gym for some reason, I can still try to do 45 minutes on that. Yeah, so that's good. That was one of the things I noticed after grad school when I was in good shape was if I exercise a lot, I'm also much more careful about what I eat. As I feel like I've earned it or something. Like it's like I don't want to ruin my hard work. I just, according to the exercise bike, I burned off 60 calories so I can have like a little fruit snack thingy. There are also these fruit snack things I like that don't have any added sugar. But you have to be careful because there are lots of fruit snacks full of sugar and stuff. And of course, now one of the big changes with weight loss and all that is these GLP-1 receptor agonists like Wegovy and I don't remember. There are like multiple ones now, and there are new ones coming out. And they traditionally required an injection, I think, every week, and now there's like pill form that's not as effective, but still pretty effective. I've looked at the research, looked at some of the papers on this, and they do have various side effects, just like any drugs. One thing is that many people who stop using them gain the weight back. Although not everyone, or some of the people gain part of the weight back. So it may be something realistically you have to take long term. Or the other thing is if you also change your behavior as part of this, then maybe you can maintain that weight more easily. I'm not sure, or more readily. But one of the sets of known side effects now, or at least that seems to be emerging, are ocular eye-related side effects, including in the retina, potentially. So I don't really want to mess with that, probably, because I've had a lot of eye problems. So in any case, those things exist. They seem like, it's such a big money maker now for pharma that there are obviously lots of new versions of this coming out. So over time, I think the safety profile, side effect profiles will be better understood. There'll be more effective versions with side effects that people can tolerate better. I think the effect on the eye will be better understood, or there'll be versions that have fewer side effects. But right now, I'm probably not going to do anything with that or any other sort of weight loss drug. The most interesting thing to me for the GLP-1 receptor agonists is that there seem to be some other health-related effects that could be positive in many cases. In fact, that's probably more interesting to me than the weight loss. So I'll keep an eye on these drugs because I think over time they are going to be useful for certain things. It seems like they can reduce inflammation, which seems to be the cause of lots of problems, especially as people get older. So, there may be new classes or new members of these classes of drugs that have broader systemic effects that, maybe have reasonable trade-offs. So, anyway. It's been interesting reading about that and learning about that. And, I feel generally more energetic now. Part of it's just figuring out my schedule and making sure I get my exercise in. I've been reading a lot. Sometimes I don't read a lot. Sometimes I do. Historically, I'm someone who's read an awful lot, although there'd be times where I'd go through where maybe I'm into movies or something and I would play a lot of movies. Just watch a lot of movies, or I was into chess or whatever it was. Like there'd be periods of time where I just didn't read as much, but I've always read a lot. One of the things that has changed that I was really worried about a few years ago was I felt like my attention had been shattered. Not like I'm I've always had some problems with attention, but I was able to read long things. But all the distractions, especially all the digital distractions, I found it challenging to read long, challenging pieces of writing. So I started challenging myself. One thing I read was Romance of the Three Kingdoms, a long Chinese novel, and I think the version I had was like 3,000 pages. It's full of Chinese names, and it's sort of like reading Russian literature or something like that. The names I found tricky, but I got through it. It took a long time, but I did read that, so that was like, okay, well, I can still pay attention. Or there was another book I just finished, which, well, a couple of books I finished that are pretty long. One was, what's the name of it? A great title. To the Success of Our Hopeless Cause. That was the name of the book. To the Success of Our Hopeless Cause, which is about Russian dissidents in the Soviet Union. That was a fascinating book, but it was long. It's pretty long, and I remember, the hardback copy looks just gigantic. I read it on an electronic device, which seems easier for my reading, given my eyesight these days. But finally finished it. There's also, was it S.T. Joshi's 2-volume biography of H.P. Lovecraft. I finally read that. I had started that and got into some pretty unsavory parts of Lovecraft's life, and I took a break for a while, and I went back and eventually finished it. So that that was also pretty long, and so I can finish long things, but it's also easy for me to get distracted. And I've been thinking a lot about reading on electronic devices versus on paper books, that type of thing. One thing that I did buy recently was, I'd gotten these stand-up lamps, these like standing LED lamps. I haven't found them all that convenient, to be honest, for reading. There's lots of like reflections and stuff, and they're just, you can't kind of curl up in bed with them in the same way. You kind of have to hold the book under them. So I finally got one of these portable lithium-battery rechargeable reading lights. Which clip on to a book or whatever. Rechargeable. And where you can change the intensity of the light and its color and all that. And I didn't really get that initially for reading books. I got it for my Alpha Smart Neo2, which I'll talk about in a little bit, in my FreeWrite Traveler. It's for these like typewriter-adjacent devices, you might call them, distraction-free writing devices that don't have backlights or forelights or whatever for e-paper or for LCD screens. Being able to clip on the reading light, even if the display is backlit, if the keyboard's not backlit, if you're in low light and you're not a super touch typist, the reading light could be useful. But I've also been using a little bit for reading paper books, and I like paper books more in general than a device under optimal situations. If the light's just right and all that, I still enjoy it. Some of the books I like are quite heavy and sort of oversized. They're not that portable. So if I'm traveling or whatever, I can get, a lot of times when I don't finish a book or don't finish it for a long time, it's because I started reading it and then I went on a trip or something. Something happened where it interrupted me. One of the things about reading on electronic device is well, I'm taking a device with me, so nothing else I can read on my phone or an iPad or something. So I tend to continue with that sort of reading. Whereas if it's an oversized book or one book in a series of books and I'm close to finishing that one, it's more like an interruption. I'm unlikely to continue unless I really commit to bringing that book, and I'm probably going to get busy and stuff. Anyway, so I've just been thinking a lot about the difference between reading on paper and these devices. One thing about reading on paper, which also comes up in the context of typewriters and typewriter-adjacent devices, it's like, well, can you read in privacy? Are you being surveilled by companies or governments or who knows whom? Can be hacked into? Can someone or some company remove the book or change it or censor it or whatever? All those types of things. Is there like a license? Can you share the book with someone? Is there DRM on it? All those sorts of things. So there are those issues, and then there's sort of a pragmatic issue of, well, can you store it? Can you move it around? Can you read it easily in different light and stuff like that? Like the electronic devices I have, they're not very good in really bright light outdoors, that type of thing. I don't have like a e-paper display for reading. So there's various trade-offs, but as my eyesight is such where reading on paper is still fine, but it has to be under good circumstances. So anyway, I've got this portable reading light, which I've been playing around with a little bit. I was reading a little of Rum Punch by Elmore Leonard last night with lithium-battery. So, I don't know. I don't know why I'm talking about this, but otherwise, the reading light really was for the Neo2, because I tried bringing the Neo2 with me kind of in this late night thing, or I was in a room that was dark, and I realized I can't actually use this device at all. Even if I could touch type, it has special keys and stuff that you have to see, and it doesn't have a backlit screen. The keyboard's not backlit or anything. It's like, okay, I need a reading light or something in order to actually write with it. Yeah. Okay, so one thing I'm reading is The Origins of Dungeons and Dragons, and also Appendix N authors and novels. So as far as the origins of Dungeons and Dragons, I'm just really interested in this. I'm interested in the origins of things in general, like the cosmic horror. I'm interested in where did that come from. H.P. Lovecraft's one of the originators of that, or other like weird fiction, that type of thing. Where did D&D come from? Well, weird horror, weird tales, and fantasy were definitely big influences on the original Dungeons and Dragons. Certainly on Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, along with miniature wargaming and various other influences. I read the first edition of Jon Peterson's Playing at the World, which is this one really big, thick volume. It was almost, speaking of talking about something long that's kind of a grind to get through, there was just so much about the history of wargaming and Kriegspiel, all this stuff. But now there's a second edition from MIT Press now of Playing at the World, and it's been totally reorganized and updated in a bunch of ways. So I've been reading that second edition. I've been reading each of the volumes, and so on the MIT Press page, you could see Jon Peterson's different books, and in fact, he's got 4 books on Dungeons and Dragons now, on sort of the history of it. One is about where Dungeons and Dragons came from. One is about how when the game came out, people figured out what do you do with it, right? There's one thing to have the rules, but then there's this whole thing about how do you actually play this game that requires things like improvisation. So I haven't read this book yet, The Elusive Shift. And then Game Wizards, which my understanding is about sort of Gary Gygax losing control over TSR, all that. I'm also just very interested in things like, the Genius as a set of genius, as Brian Eno calls it. What was it going on with Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, or in the Midwest with the Twin Cities, Minneapolis area and all that in this time period of like late 60s, early 70s, where this emerged. Why did it emerge there? And, I don't know. There's something about Dungeons and Dragons. If you study like the history of wargaming and games in general, it feels to me like it's not obvious that it would emerge at that time or at all. Maybe, maybe that's why I'm so interested in it. It's like, where did this thing come from? And I also I'm of an age where Advanced Dungeons and Dragons came out. The core rule set came out just as I was starting to get into this sort of thing. I had a friend whose older brother was getting into D&D or into it. So I sort of hit the optimal time to get exposed to that as a youngling, with the sort of the first wave of, post miniature oriented, I would say, version of the game. So I'm just very interested in it. It's like, where did that come from? It feels like blues, it's something that's like an American invention, and it's also tied to a certain time period. Just very interesting. And then, of course, it's had such a big influence on the popular culture. One of the reasons I was thinking about this is I've visited a couple of game stores recently, one in Cambridge, Mass, and another one in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And looking at the games there and looking at, their role-playing games and Dungeons & Dragons and indie games and all that, it was like very obvious from what I've read about the history of Dungeons & Dragons so far that it's like, I think at least some of the people who are involved in the creation and early playing of Dungeons & Dragons, and some of the people who are really involved in the gaming now, they would feel very uncomfortable with each other, and also very uncomfortable with the notion of the games, and sort of how it's played and how the rules have changed and all that, and what the influences are. So that's also interesting to me how that's changed over time. So anyway, I'm just reading about this. I'm also I've been reading through Appendix N. So in the 1979 Dungeon Master's Guide for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, AD&D, Appendix N includes influences, like reading influences. That's very, very interesting. And a number of the authors and books for those authors it's like a relatively long list, not a super long list, but it's a relatively long list. But there's a small subset where Gary Gygax said, okay, these are the ones who are probably most influential on Dungeons & Dragons, or at least Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. So some of those authors I knew, like H.P. Lovecraft. Some I didn't know about until I learned about them through Appendix N, like Fritz Leiber, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. I didn't know about them, although I had gotten the Lankmar module, which seemed really interesting in the 80s. I had no idea what Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser were. It's like, I love Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser now. It's like, I like that a lot. Hadn't read any of the Conan stories. I'd seen the Conan movies, but the Conan stories feel very different to me. So anyway, just going through and trying to kind of understand what was in the air at that time and the thoughts people were having. Also, it's occurred to me I don't know how much of an influence this was, but I've read a little bit about the history of improv in the United States and the role of Second City and sort of like things happening off campus at University of Chicago and things happening in Los Angeles and all this stuff. To me, D&D has always had like a very strong improv aspect to it. Although I don't know if, when I read about the histories of these things, I don't think I've ever read improv being mentioned. But I'm just curious, maybe this Jon Peterson book about, the elusive shift talks about that. I don't know. I'd be curious to read that. But I've been going through Appendix N, just reading different authors. I want to read at least all of the kind of main influences according to Gygax, and I'd like to eventually read them all. So I've got this book also, Appendix N, The Eldritch Roots of Dungeons and Dragons. I've been reading through that. This is a bunch of short stories by some of those authors, but some of the authors also have novels or series of novels that are, there's a lot more to it. So I'd like to learn more about it. But yeah, the Eldritch Roots, that's something I find really interesting. Like this was very clear to me as a kid when I first saw like the Dungeon Master's Guide, which I think must have come out about the time I was getting into, heard about this game. I remember buying my copy of the Dungeon Master's Guide. It was like, maybe I bought it right after it came out. That's certainly possible. I may have bought it in 79. In fact, I probably did. So, there was a time where the rules for Dungeons and Dragons were incomplete. There was the player's handbook, there was the monster manual, and then the player's handbook, but there was no Dungeon Master's Guide. And so how do you play this thing? So that was really interesting to find out. And then Dragon Magazine, its influence in this whole idea of people trying to figure out how to play this game. So now I talk about it more, think about it more. I definitely want to read this elusive shift game, book by Jon Peterson. So anyway, I've been reading that. Another thing that sort of inspired me to want to read more and sort of beyond, I don't know, things like Romance of the Three Kingdoms is this great conversation from a YouTube channel, The Book Graveyard, and Paul Giamatti, who, he's known for acting in a lot of independent films. I've enjoyed his work for a long time, especially when he played Harvey Picar in American Splendor. I think that was definitely one of the highlights of his career, and also, Sideways and The Holdovers and all that. But yeah, if you haven't seen American Splendor, I highly recommend that with Hope Davis. Anyway, this is a great conversation. I had no idea Paul Giamatti was into sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, up to mid 80s, sort of pulpish or trade paperback, pocket paperback books, and the sorts of things that maybe aren't going to make it to the great book series, let's say. So I just enjoyed this conversation, and it made me want to read things. I guess it's like Joe Bob Briggs. If you're familiar with Joe Bob Briggs, I've also been reading a Joe Bob Briggs book on sort of the drive-in movies, right? It's like, I grew up in the 80s, had HBO or whatever, and then later there was like, was it TBS? There was Dinner and a Movie and Up All Night. Was it TNT? Or no, USA Up All Night. And they mostly show just really bad movies. And so there's also, there's a collection of paperbacks, which as I think Paul would say, is like some of these books have no business being written as well as they are. They're just like, okay, here's a series of 300 books. They're just kind of, take 3 days for someone to write it, and then send it out the door for people who maybe aren't as discerning as they could be. But some of the books are actually much better written than you might think. So I've enjoyed this conversation a lot. It's sort of, there's a Japanese foreigners, a group of them that have a YouTube channel called Trash Taste. It's like, their trash taste in whatever anime or movies or whatever. So it's kind of like trash taste for fiction, and trash taste for, the movies you would find in drive-in theaters or whatever. So I just appreciate that. So I've been reading some of the novels that they talked about. Okay, so that's reading. I've been just reading a lot. I get grouchy if I go too long not read. That's been the case for a very long time. Writing. I'm trying to get to the point where I become grouchy if I don't write. Well, I mean, I think I've been grouchy if I don't write for a while, but then I'm just grouchy because I wasn't writing. But now I'm writing, so as long as I write, I'm less grouchy. So I think that's the trick. So one of the things I've been getting into are typewriters and typewriter-adjacent devices. One person who I've watched tons of videos on YouTube from and read blog posts from and all that is Joe Van Cleve. He's got this blog and he's got a great YouTube channel. He's very into the typewriters and sharing typewriters for artists and for writers, and for using typewriters to be able to write privately and not have it surveilled or have distractions and ads and people trying to hack into your machine, and software upgrades and licenses changing and fonts changing, all that nonsense. And I like his blog because one of the things he'll do, and he's not the only person who does this, but he'll write his blog posts on a typewriter and post an image. Now, for accessibility, this isn't so great. I don't know if there's any. Yeah. So, So that's one of the downsides, or the trade-offs here. You could use OCR, maybe optical character recognition, or read it in or type it in, whatever. But that's a trade-off. Is it's not accessible. But I like the fact that he organizes these type-ins, or he participates in them, and this is something I learned more and more about. These happen in different places in the country, that there are type-ins of various sorts. So in LA recently, there was just a couple of days ago a big typewriter event. So at a museum or a bookstore or a library or whatever, people who are into typewriters will bring in their typewriters, and then members of the public can come and just try them out and write. A lot of people now have never touched a typewriter, certainly haven't touched a manual typewriter, or maybe even seen one outside of a movie or something. So it seems like, just like there's a growing interest in vinyl records and actually owning physical objects, things like that, I think there seems to be like a growing interest in general in analog and sort of physical things, and sort of realization that we've given up a whole lot to have these remarkable multi-use devices that we have. And you could see that, was it New York and California passing legislation, or trying to pass legislation about 3D printers, and whether or not the 3D printers have to be locked down because they're worried about people printing guns or whatever it is. Cory Doctorow has this talk from 10 years ago or more about the coming war on general purpose computing, where he talks about all this sort of thing. So the nice thing about these typewriters from 50 or 100 years ago is you don't have to worry about the operating system or upgrading it or whatever. Now, they could break down physically. There are all sorts of other things that are trade-offs. So they're heavy, they take room. You actually have to have a ribbon with ink. Depending on the model, a ribbon might be hard to find, that type of thing. But many of these devices have been in use for decades, and if you take care of them, they'll continue working for decades. The two typewriters I have are both at least 50 years old, I think. One's like 60 years old, something like that. So I enjoy Joe Van Cleve stuff, and once you get into this, it's like anything else, right? There's like a big subculture. But I appreciate it, and I appreciate that more people seem to be getting into this, and I'm getting into it. And just the idea of distraction-free, surveillance-free, ad-free, software license-free things, and taking, like using something that already exists, that's reliable and doesn't, with the manuals, they don't require electricity, all that stuff. You can bring it outside and just type away. So, yeah, I've been appreciating that a lot. As far as my typewriters, I currently have two. I didn't plan to have two, but I ended up with a second one recently. So my first one, which I think I talked about in the last video, is a Smith Corona SCM Coronet Automatic 12 electric typewriter. This is not mine. I was trying to find something about that, and all I found were people selling them. So, but mine looks kind of like this. I think the color scheme is maybe a little different. Maybe the color scheme's the same. I forget. I want to say mine's brown, but I don't know. Maybe it's like this. But yeah, I love this typewriter. It's loud. That's one of the trade-offs. It's very, very loud. It's very loud. But yeah, I like that. I've written a number of personal letters on that one. I recently was on a family vacation to Traverse City, Michigan, which is a cool little town on Lake Michigan, and sort of the northern part of the bottom of Michigan. Michigan has like two parts. There's a part up near Minnesota or whatever that kind of sticks out. But this is like the part that looks like a hand is the bottom part of Michigan. It's like up there in the upper left part of that is Traverse City. And there's a cool bookstore there called Landmark Books, which is in an old psychiatric hospital. Traverse City State Hospital. So it's very, very small, used bookstore. Actually, some had a bunch of those paperbacks out front that I was just talking about. I almost bought some of them. But they also carry typewriters. And so they had a typewriter in the window. They had several typewriters on display, but there was one that immediately caught my eye, which was this one. Mine has a different color scheme, but it's similar. It's an Aztec 700 manual typewriter. This is also known as the Erica typewriter, and it was actually made in East Germany during the Cold War. Mine, I think, is from the serial number for mine is like 1961 or 62. I'm not sure. And the typewriter company that made this apparently, I think, was in Dresden, and Dresden got firebombed during the war and all that. But they were known for making really good typewriters, I think, going back to the 1920s. And then after Germany got divided, the Soviet-controlled part in East Germany still made really good typewriters. I was surprised. I didn't really think of super high quality for East German products, but this typewriter is really well regarded. The German version, instead of QWERTY, has QWERTZ instead of a Y at the end. So you have to be a little careful if you get the German version, if you want the US or English keyboard layout. Mine has that. So the Aztec was like the branded one for, I guess, the US or for export in English-speaking country. And so it's manual. A lot of people apparently think it's one of the best manuals ever made. I quite like it. It looks great. It's reliable. Still works just fine. From 1962 or 61. It doesn't require electricity. I hadn't used a manual typewriter in quite a while, and I had forgotten sort of how much force it takes to get a good, impression on the paper, especially after using the electric typewriter. And I will say, I have to say, like, I like mechanical keyboards, and I have a ton of mechanical keyboards. There's nothing like typing on an electric typewriter. They beat any mechanical keyboard, including, the IBM keyboards, the Model M or Model Fs or whatever. Like the IBM Selectric, that just was gorgeous. And also the Smith Corona I have, which I don't think feels as good as an IBM Selectric, but still feels way, way better than any mechanical keyboard ever used. So I don't care what sort of switches. But this feels very different than the electric one, the electric typewriter. So the electromechanical type bar type with the SCM Smith Corona, you only have to press that key a tiny bit and it goes whack, It's a great, very satisfying sound and makes a full strength impression. And you can adjust, how strong the impression is for using carbon papers if you want to make copies and stuff like that. So you can really thwap it hard if you want, although it's probably not real good for the platen unless you have backing pages or something. So, but that's not true with the manual. Like with the manual, you can really tell if you didn't really press that key down all the way. And in fact, if you don't press it down all the way, the type bar just won't even hit the paper, but the carriage will advance. And so then you got like go backwards and stuff. So it's a little fiddly that way. I found it sort of much more strenuous to type on this than on the electric typewriter. And I also found, interestingly enough, this surprised me with the electric typewriter, the Smith Corona, when I would type, if I had it on like a placemat on the table, it would start turning to the left, like really torquing. And I have to keep pushing it back. And I figured, well, this isn't, belt driven. It doesn't have like a motor. It doesn't have like super torque on things. So this one's going to stay still. No, it's exactly the same thing. It seemed to torque exactly the same amount. It's just the carriage moving seems to cause that torque. So yeah, but it's a very physical experience typing on either type of machine. This one, you really have to work at it, and you want to try to get, or at least you'll be able to tell from what you're typing if you've been consistent in pressing the keys. I just found it much more difficult to type with this machine than the electric. So yeah, I wrote a couple personal letters on this one too, and yeah, I don't know. I'm just much more used to electric. I spent a lot of time typing on an IBM Selectric 2, so I'm way more used to the just the feel of typing longer things on typewriters. But keep giving this a try, and it's it's like a work of art. I like the story about it coming from East Germany and all that. Very interesting. Okay, so that's my typewriter. My typewriters, yeah, and then they're loud and heavy, even though they're portables. They are loud. The electric one, that's just loud. Even just turning it on has this kind of hum, but when you're typing on it, it's loud for sure. And then the manual, in order to strike the paper with enough force to make it legible, by the time you do that, it's a little loud. It's not like ultra loud. It's definitely not as loud as the electric one, but it's still, it's not super quiet. Yeah. Okay, so now let's get into the typewriter-adjacent devices. And I think I already mentioned that I have a Neo2. I call it the Alpha Smart Neo2, although I think it was like Renaissance bought out Alpha Smart or whatever for the Neo2. So it's like not technically an Alpha Smart. I think it's a Renaissance Neo2. Everyone calls it an Alpha Smart Neo2. Yeah, so this was, a device that was used to teach lots of kids keyboarding skills in the, I guess, late 90s, early 2000s. It's been out of production for a long time. I don't think, Alpha Smart definitely doesn't exist, and I don't think Renaissance exists anymore. So they're just like not, that's it. They don't, they're not made anymore or repaired. They've got a keyboard that's a little mushy. You can fit a few lines of text on the LCD. There's no backlight for the LCD. But it's like practically indestructible. It was designed for a bunch of middle school kids to beat on it. Mine's got a few dents or something or nicks on it, but, it seems pretty much indestructible. 3 AA batteries that last like a year or something ridiculous. Hook up a USB cable to your computer to transfer files. It's like an old USB A to B printer cable is what you have to hook up. It doesn't have a backlight, and the keyboard's not backlit. Also, the screen's at a little bit of an angle, but it's not necessarily great for reading depending on your body position or what you're typing on. Transporting it can be a little awkward because it is curved at the top, so it takes up more space than if it were flat. But if it were completely flat, I don't think it would be very nice to use. So I'm glad that it's curved up some. It has a lot of compromises in it, but it's a decent machine for writing. And you can do some editing, so that was my start. Now with these typewriter-adjacent, focused writing, distraction-free writing devices that that weren't actually typewriters. And I know people who swear by these. One thing is they used to be cheap. You get them for like $20 or something. Now it's like way more expensive, because I think enough people have figured out that there's like a reasonable distraction-free writing experience that that's very portable. So the prices have gone way up. I forget how much mine was. It was like on the order of $200, I think. It was somewhere around there. Compared to some of the other devices I'm going to show you, that's still not that much, but in a sense, these are all optional devices compared to a pencil and paper, or a fountain pen even, and a notebook, or just a regular pen and a notebook, right? You don't need any of these, especially if you have a laptop. I'm recording this on a very expensive, very powerful laptop, but this device has several amazing features. 1 is it can only write. 2 is it's not connected to the internet. 3 is it can't show, movies or play music or, show you YouTube shorts or anything. It's not connected to social media. You can't receive SMS messages, cat pictures, anything else. There's no software updates. Any of that stuff can't be hacked. It's not connected physically or by Wi-Fi. I mean, this does have some sort of Wi-Fi thingy. Forget it. It also has some sort of infrared thing. I don't mess with any of that. So the only way I ever do anything with it is connect it to my laptop via the USB cable, and then you press the send key in the upper right, and it just like types as if you were typing out a keyboard. It shows up as a keyboard, so I can open Emacs and it just like hit send, and it takes a while, but it types in. Reliable, not fancy but reliable. So it has lots of good features and mostly anti-features. And one of the greatest features is that it can't run code. It doesn't have Shea Scheme or Racket installed or any of that stuff. So if I'm writing a book or notes or whatever it is, or a paper, I guess, having to do with programming or code or something like that, there's no chance I'm going to get distracted, doing a bunch of hacking and stuff like that. I can write code, but I can't run it. So I can run it in my head. That's all fine. And also, amazing battery life. You don't have to recharge it. Pretty much indestructible. I've seen pictures of people at the beach with this, that sort of thing. I'm not going to bring my laptop to the beach. Like literally they're on the beach with the sand and everything, right? There's no way I would bring my laptop there. So, pretty nice device. Keyboard feels kind of mushy to me. Like I don't think the keyboard's amazing, but it is like full size. It's got these kind of weird keys, in some places, and each file, there are like 8 file positions. Each file can hold like 10,000 words roughly. So if you're writing anything really long, you have to kind of break it up, but that's not the way I use these anyway. I use these to like write first drafts of parts and then send it to the laptop. So anyway, the Neo2, I like it. I haven't been using a lot recently. I've kind of moved on to some other things. Okay, this FreeWrite Smart Typewriter. So this is like the first arguably upgrade I got over the Neo2. Okay, so the Neo2 also has another advantage. It's very quiet. And so compared to the typewriter for the Neo2, it's quiet. You don't have to worry about a ribbon or your hands getting ink on them if you're changing the ribbon or any of that stuff. But it's very quiet. You could type with someone else sleeping in the room or that type of thing. And with that backlight that I bought that clips on, you can kind of clip it to the side. It's a little awkward, but you can shine it on the screen and the keyboard. So even in, a dark room, you can type on it. It's not as easy as like using a laptop with a backlit keyboard or something, but you can do it. So it's quiet. You can use it in lots of contexts where you just like couldn't use a typewriter. So that's nice. All right. So, but if you want the typewriter experience in a slightly different way, that's intentionally designed to be a distraction-free writing device as opposed to teaching middle schoolers how to keyboard or whatever. FreeWrite is one of the companies that makes distraction-free writing things. And so the idea of free writing is the practice where to get a first draft out, you just like write. It's sort of like append-only programming, just like typing. You just add to it. It's not designed for editing or critical passes or whatever. It's like just get everything down and get it quickly. So typewriters are great for that. I found that I've done a lot of writing like that with typewriters and really focuses you when you're at a typewriter. I've written more personal letters with my typewriters than I have in years. So I like that a lot. So that's a great part of the experience. One thing about typewriters is, you have to get into a computer somehow if you wanted to, say, write a book and you're going to somehow end up on the computer in a computer format for whatever reason. So smart typewriter idea is, well, what if we have something as form factor is kind of like a typewriter and it's like kind of luggable. There's a handle on this device on the back. So maybe it's a little heavy, but even that kind of feels like a typewriter experience, but you can hook it up to your computer and it is electronic as opposed to being electromechanical like the Smith Corona I have. You can do some editing, although that might be awkward, and it can do things like count how many words you've written, that type of thing. Maybe you can organize and have multiple files going on. And in this device has e-paper, electronic paper, like like a Kindle, that type of thing. So you could use it outside, and works well in natural light. And the Smart Typewriter has what they call a front light, which is basically backlit e-paper. There are a bunch of trade-offs with this machine. First of all, it's expensive. I don't really know. I don't remember how much this is. Was it? Okay, here we go. $700. $700. Now this company's not making a huge number of these, I'm sure. So that's part of it, right? It's not like they're made in Shenzhen and there are 20 million of them coming off the assembly line every year. So this is like a low volume thing. And it's also seen, I'm sure, as like kind of a luxury or hipster item or whatever. And some people have like very negative reactions to this, the same way like to maybe an Apple product or to like using a fancy fountain pen or something. The e-ink is not very fast and refresh. The Sailfish, I think it is, firmware upgrades have made it faster. Like that was one of the big things people complained about with the FreeWrite is you would type something, it would take forever to show up on the screen. For the typing, I think that's basically been fixed now. That's been my experience. Like, yeah, there's a little bit of lag, but when I'm working on stuff, I'm just trying to get everything down. I'm not a super touch typist. I'm not really looking at the screen. I look at the screen to read, but I'm not like staring at the screen as I'm typing. I don't know how to explain it. Other people who've used this device have said the same thing. Now, this might sound really bizarre to someone who's used to touch typing. And if I were using Emacs on my laptop, I actually am. I'm a good enough touch typist that sure, I can basically touch type. And if I were using Emacs, I'd be looking at the screen and, correcting as I go. But there's something about this device where that's not the way I use it. And I know for at least some other people who use this sort of device, it's not like that. They're like staring off into space or staring at the keyboard. I don't know how to explain it. It's more like writing with a fountain pen in a journal or with a typewriter. So I'm like, oh yeah, maybe it's like the typewriter. I mean, it's supposed to be a typewriter experience. If I'm typing with the physical typewriter, I'm not really looking at the page all the time. Maybe looking at the keyboard, looking up, sometimes I look at the page, sometimes I look at the keyboard, sometimes I look to the side or look out a window or something. I'm not worried about that if I'm just trying to get a draft out or get my ideas down. And also with an actual typewriter, like my typewriters, neither one has correction features. So, and I'm just not worried about making little errors. So, if I make a mistake, no big deal. On the Smart Typewriter, you can fix mistakes. It's a little awkward. The biggest mistake I make, and the most common, is I hit that stupid caps lock key. I mean, in fact, maybe I should just like take that keycap off. I accidentally hit the key quite a bit. I hate that. That's probably the biggest mistake or the most common mistake I make. You can move the cursor around. It's kind of awkward and it's a little slow. Page up, page down is kind of slow because of the e-ink. So those things are kind of awkward. In a sense, it's probably good. I think originally FreeWrite, they didn't even let you. I think you couldn't navigate around like to delete stuff. You could only there was a backspace key and that's it. You could only delete. You couldn't actually edit. And then they added the editing. I read that somewhere that originally it was like, no, this is append only basically. But it kind of feels like an append only device. It's slow enough and awkward enough to edit where I have to think twice. Like, do I want to edit? Do I want to fix that typo? If it's typo in code, because I do type code on this, obviously I don't run it, but that's an advantage, I think. If it's like if it's like a mistake where I think I might not catch it editing, then I'll probably go fix it. I'll probably edit it. But if it's just like an obvious stupid thing, like I just typed out random G in the middle of a sentence, it's like, fix that in post, right? Fix that when I edit and just keep going. It depends. I'm a little faster now at editing, so I probably will fix it editing wise, but it's really designed to get first drafts out. So if you're spending a lot of time editing on this, you're probably not going to find it very enjoyable. And you can only see a little bit of text on the screen at once. You can change it, but I forget, like 11 lines of text is the most or something, I think. There's not a whole lot of text. So it's not like this giant display I have right now. And there aren't really like fonts. I don't know. And there is a way to like change some fonts and stuff. You have to use their stupid software. I hate their software, okay? Like the online stuff. For all of these devices, I don't ever want to have to connect it to the internet or any of that stuff. I hate all that. This device has Wi-Fi. On the right, there's a switch. And you can use their post... whatever. They've got some sort of online syncing software and stuff that people complain about a lot. Okay. Like the online experience and using like syncing with the cloud and stuff. No. That's not how I want to use this or use it at all. Instead, I just connect it to USB cable, and then this mounts on my Mac like it was a drive, and like a USB drive or something. And I can just drag the TXT files off of it and then edit those. So, and you only can go in one direction, at least with the USB. I don't know if their cloud sync thing lets you push something back on it, but basically once it goes off the device, when you've done the USB thing, you can't stick it back on. It's mounted as a read-only drive. So you can pull off files, which are all TXT files. And I don't know, like it sort of forces you into a certain workflow. I got very excited at one point. It's like, okay, great. I'll actually do some editing in Emacs, clean it up, and then I'll keep it all in plain text and I'll stick it back on the device with the drive. And then I can like kind of fill in more text on the FreeWrite. And it doesn't work that way because there's no way to drag it onto the device because it's mounted read-only. So that kind of annoyed me, but then it's like, okay, fine. I have a different workflow. I'll create a draft on the FreeWrite, mount the read-only drive on my Mac, pull the TXT file out, open an Emacs, convert it to LaTeX, do some editing, typeset it in very, very simple LaTeX, super simple LaTeX, and then print it out, hard copy, and then I'll mark it up with a fountain pen. And then I will put the edits back in Emacs. Now, my theory, and I haven't tested this yet, but my impression is if I really wanted to write like a whole section or something like that, and I didn't have any text at all, well, I can go back to the FreeWrite. I could have like the printout and say, okay, here's a section. I don't have anything. I want to write a lot of text. I can sit there and generate that on the FreeWrite and then drag it back onto the Mac. So it doesn't seem like that should be a problem. The other thing I'm working on is trying to edit on my Mac without getting distracted. Like that's like, I remember talking to someone who's a professional, chemist and worked with mass spec. And we were sort of talking about work habits. I'm like, yeah, I like to go, I like to work late at night. It's a typical programmer thing. I might work, until 4 a.m. or something, which I'm not doing right now. I'm going to bed early. But, and her response was, I don't do that because I don't want to die. What she meant was like her lab is full of like dangerous stuff and, pressurized gas and things that go boom and all that. And she's not going to sit there working until she's exhausted. That's just like a dangerous thing. You got to work during the day. Other people need to be around, all that stuff. So that's kind of how I feel about working on my Mac now. It's like, okay, it's sort of like that chemistry lab is very, useful, very powerful. However, it's also like a super dangerous environment in terms of attention and being distracted and all that. So what I've been doing is like, okay, I'll work with my laptop at the kitchen table with my headphones on, listening some music that's local, that's, on my laptop, from a CD or whatever that I burn. I mean, not burned, but you know what I mean, imported from a CD. And I'll turn off Wi-Fi, no web browser, none of that stuff. And more to the point, I won't even do any of that until I've already marked up the hard copy. So I'll print out, I'll use the laptop to typeset, print out a copy, but then the laptop goes away and I do all my editing with the fountain pen, mark up the whole document, and then and only then will I open up the laptop. And the only thing I'll open is Emacs and, the PDF, my terminal, so I can run Make and all that, the PDF viewer. And, that's okay. It helps if other people are around as well. So if I do that and it's very focused and I'm like, I've got to get these edits in, then I can do it. Otherwise, I'm just one text message, one cat picture away, or one notification of a software update, or, one checking Hacker News or YouTube or whatever from disaster. So, yeah. Anyway, I got it. And the other thing is I have a little digital stopwatch, and originally I had a nice one that was like Casio or something. Or maybe a Seiko. It's a nice one. It's like indestructible also, but it makes a beep every time you click the button. And that alone was really annoying to me. So I found a brand that like doesn't make any sound when you're clicking it. So I've got these in different colors. And so I had the stopwatch. I got the green stopwatch for the writing, for working on this document that I'm working on. And I'll start it. And anytime I stop, I stop it. If I get up and make a cup of coffee or go to the bathroom or any distraction, turn it off. If someone wants to talk to me, I'll stop the stopwatch and then take care of that and then go back. Now today I got 2 hours, 20 minutes in. Yeah. So that's the smart typewriter. Yeah, I don't use the Wi-Fi thing. I'll tell you a Wi-Fi story in a second for the other device that kind of made me upset. A few more things about this. It's got a keyboard. I think it's technically a mechanical keyboard. I don't like the keyboard very much. If you're into mechanical keyboards, you're not going to find this amazing probably. And I'm not the only one who has that opinion. I'd say it's serviceable. It's not amazing. But it is distraction free. It really is. You might be cursing at the screen and how slow it is to update when you're scrolling up and down or when you're trying to do some edits. But I find it really is distraction free, and I've managed to write a couple of pretty long first drafts of documents, including significant amounts of Scheme and Mini Canron code on this device. Now, having said that, this is not my preferred device for editing code from a typesetting standpoint. Like, it's quite annoying in a way, but in another way, for writing something that includes code, once again, the distraction free is great because I can't run it. I have to run it in my head, and I can put a placeholder and say, hey, here's the run expression from Mini Canron, and it produces fill it in later, which is like the old reporter's trick. Fill it in later. There's, a reporter would use a shorthand like, okay, fact check this, fill this in, whatever, but keep writing, get the first draft out. So in terms of generating a first draft, I really like it. it's kind of heavy. It's aluminum on this plate, and it's like the bottom is plastic. It has a lithium battery. You charge it with USB. I didn't find the battery life incredible. It's nothing compared to the Neo2. The Neo2, like lasts like a year on 3 AAAs. You're not going to get anything like that on this device. It is e-ink, so basically doesn't use significant electricity to keep the screen updated. But it's just not, and if the backlight's okay. It's got a few different gradations. Setting the control, setting the options and stuff are it's just all a little awkward. It really is just you can write and you can kind of read. Reading's okay. Editing is really bad. Editing. It's not really an editing device. You can do it. It's not great. So it's kind of awkward. I brought this to Traverse City. This thing spins around. So it's got like a little handle. Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. But I have done a lot of writing with it. So that's how I'm judging this. Have I done a lot of writing? Yeah. I have done a lot of writing with it. There we go. I've done way more writing on this than I have with the Neo 2. I think it is a better writing experience. Nothing else, if nothing else, just because the screen seems to work better for me. And then after lugging that thing around and the Neo 2 and my laptop, my MacBook Pro, all to Traverse City, I was getting tired of that, especially when I brought back a typewriter on an airplane for that Aztec 700. It was okay, I've got 4 writing devices, and several of them are big. I thought, all right, it's time probably to get a Traveler. So this is also from Freewrite. This is basically the same thing as the Smart Typewriter, but in a portable form factor. There are a few differences. So it's got a clamshell and it folds up, which protects the screen, which is good. It does have a very shiny case that gets fingerprints on it. Some people don't like that. Also, just like with any foldable device, if you press on it, the screen could get damaged. So it's got a little holder. It's got a little piece of, cushioning material for when you close it, at least for shipping. I don't know. If it can't handle that, then it's probably not going to survive my use. So far, it's been okay. But it's got the same buttons instead of switches. Instead of aluminum, it's all plastic, basically. Keyboard is one of these scissor type keyboards. I had some bad experiences on the MacBook Pro during the Johnny Hive days with the keyboard, where it's a little piece of dust or food, and your whole keyboard's disabled. The sense I get is this keyboard is probably more robust than the bad old days of those Mac keyboards. And the keyboard, it feels okay. This is what I'm talking about, where it's I don't think the mechanical keyboard for the Smart Typewriter is all that great, because I don't think it's significantly better than the Traveler keyboard. I mean, they feel different, but it's not I think the Smart Typewriter keyboard's all that much better. So same e-ink display. I think it's even the same size. I'm not 100% sure. It doesn't have a front light, or the backlight, or what you want to call it. So that's a big change. And that's another reason why, that clip-on LED light I have could be useful. But like I said, part of the issue is the keyboard here is not backlit. So because there's some special keys, there's the page up, page down, and these red keys you press down for certain functions, to create a new document, you hold them both down. I don't know. I guess the touch typing, if you really can touch type, you probably could do it all in the dark with the backlit light on. yeah, it's probably not that bad. I think it'd be easier, much easier than on the Neo to do this one in the dark. But I'm not a very good touch typist, and given how annoying it is to do editing on this and correction, I wouldn't want to have to do it like in the dark personally. I probably would find it frustrating. The travel is very compact. I think it weighs like a little over a pound, like maybe 1.5 pound or 1.2 pounds, I think. So it's way more convenient to move around than the smart typewriter. I'm not sure how great the battery life is. I assume the smart typewriter has a bigger battery, but I'm not sure if that's true. It's okay. Once again, you connect it with USB to your laptop and it mounts as a read-only drive, but lacks the light. One good thing about it is, like, I keep it on my bed within arm's reach. And if I want to do something, like, I just grab it, start, hold these two red buttons down, start a new document. This red button turns it on, press down the two red buttons, start a new document, start typing. So I can do that within a couple seconds. So it's almost as fast. It's probably about as fast as me grabbing my notebook, fountain pen, uncapping the fountain pen. It's like similar sorts of time. So it only takes a couple seconds to start writing. It's very convenient. As far as like carpal tunnel, repetitive stress injury, I did feel some twinges of, I felt it a little bit with typing with this. And I think the reason is, unlike the smart typewriter, which is more like a typewriter, like, you kind of have to be set up with this device. Whereas, the Traveler, you can use it from pretty much any angle. And I think ergonomically it was being lazy. wasn't really using good posture and all that. So, I guess that's one thing is, because it's so convenient, you could type on it with one hand, like, hold it at an angle or hold it upside down and type on it if you really wanted to. So, so the thing that annoyed me is I had this idea of a workflow, which turned out not to be possible, where I would stick the edited text document back on this device via USB, and then I would, kind of navigate to sections that were empty and then continue writing, use it to kind of fill out parts of the draft that were empty. Well, that didn't work because you couldn't, the via USB, it mounts on a Mac or PC or GNU Linux or wherever as a read-only drive. Maybe there's some way to defeat that, but I don't know how to do it. In any case, so I said, well, let me try syncing with this cloud service thing they have. And so I actually turned on the Wi-Fi and connected to local Wi-Fi and set up an account. I think you have to have the device to set up the account for Postbox or whatever it's called, whatever the service is. And I signed in, and it uploaded the documents instantly to the cloud. And I don't know, I had like a not good feeling. It's like, the cool thing about typewriter, you could use it. You don't have to worry about software upgrades or downgrades or licenses or cloud services or, companies surveilling you or government surveilling you or any of that stuff, people hacking into your system. And as soon as I connected this device to Wi-Fi and to their service, I just got like a yucky feeling. I'm back into that. So I turned off the Wi-Fi. It's like, I don't want to do that again. I don't ever want to connect to it. And also the fact that, it didn't ask me if I want which documents I wanted to upload to their service. Just instantly uploaded everything. I didn't like that. So I thought, oh, great. More AI training of models, or who knows what's going to happen to that. So I was disgusted with that. So I hate all the software around these devices, like other than what's on the device itself. It's like, well, the firmware seems to work. Now, some people have said in the past that some of these devices can get into like boot cycles where they're having trouble. They just keep like booting. I haven't had that problem. The only problem I've had is when I used a USB B to C converter, or USB A to C, whatever it was, the Apple dongle thing, it didn't mount. I had to use like a USB-C to USB-C cable, and then it mounted. That's the only problem I've run into with these devices. But like, I hate all the cloud stuff, and a lot of people have complained about either losing files or losing data or syncing problems. So like, just avoid that. I just want to use these things as a typewriter, connect them to my computer, and drag a file off, or press send like in the Neo2. That's it. I don't want anything else. So anyway, that's the Traveler and my sense of the good and bad of it so far. This one I just got, so I haven't used it that much, but you know, I have the sense that for writing first drafts, it's also really good, and it's way more portable. So you know, if I go to Traverse City again, I'll probably bring this or some other very portable device, not the smart typewriter, which, you know, to be fair to it, is supposed to be kind of a form factor of a typewriter. It's supposed to replicate a typewriter experience, including the heft of it. Okay, a device which I've ordered, which hasn't arrived yet. I think it's supposed to ship in July, early July maybe, is this BYOK, or BYOK, Bring Your Own Keyboard. And this was, I think, a Kickstarter initially, or the equivalent. And so there's this, see, turn off my internet. This BYOK device, it's just like a little rectangular device. I guess it's like roughly the size of a cell phone or something. And it just has an LCD screen and has like a backlight. It has some physical buttons on it. You can change like the backlight intensity, I think, and maybe the color. And you can connect it via USB to a keyboard or via Bluetooth or whatever. And it's got a magnetic mount on the back, so you can get like one of these cell phone style, you know, devices to mount it on. There's a bunch of different things you can buy that, you know, that hold, like, basically cell phone holders. And it's got some sort of software on it for doing editing and writing, stuff like that. I don't know kind of what that's like. And of course they have their own cloud syncing thingy, which also sounds horrible. And I've heard bad things about it, but you know, like I said, I just don't want any of that to begin with. I just want to use it as as like a typewriter, and not, you know, stay out of the cloud and anything like that. I think, if I remember correctly, there is a way to like connect an SD device to this or something for moving files off. But I think it also does the trick with USB cable where it can be like mounted. I believe that's the case. I have no intention of using their cloud stuff. The cool thing is, apparently it works with just about any keyboard. So if you like mechanical keyboards or any other types of keyboards, you can, you know, use a keyboard, and I've got lots of keyboards around. You can use wireless keyboard if you want, or a wired one, whatever. You can use a super portable keyboard. It's a very portable device, obviously. Once again, it's got a lithium battery. So it's part of it with all these devices, except maybe the Neo2, which may or may not have lithium AA batteries in it. If you didn't put those in, you got to check on yourself. But all these other devices, the electronic devices, they have lithium batteries, so you can't pack them in check-on luggage. And also nowadays, I think there are even stricter for the U.S. airlines, you're not supposed to put them in baggage like in the overhead or whatever. You're supposed to have it out where you can see it in case there's a problem with the lithium battery. So that's something to consider. It's very portable. I think it has supposedly decent battery life. I'm not sure about the readability of the screen. There are different fonts and all that. And there is a backlight. The backlight looks a little, I don't know. It looks like you can see kind of the rays coming up. I've only seen this on video and photos, so I don't know. I haven't seen one in person. I'm not sure about the readability of the screen yet, or if I'll like the screen. Not sure. It's not e-paper. And you do the other side of it is you have to have a keyboard with you, and either the cable or you have to connect it via Bluetooth or whatever to get it working. But there are like tiny little fold-up keyboards and all sorts of things, or 60% keyboards and all that. They're like very portable things. So if you just want portability, as long as you're willing to carry an extra keyboard and probably a stand, this is like a good solution. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious about it. Certainly for your keyboard experience, if you just want to have like a really good keyboard, this is probably the way to go. Now, another device, which I've seen on videos and just reading some reviews about today, is this Pomera, this is from a Japanese company. There's a Pomera, I think it's a 250 US is the Japanese version that's specifically for the US with the US keyboard. It's very, very small. The keyboard is smaller than a regular size keyboard. It's smaller than the keyboard for the FreeWrite Traveler. So some people have complained about that, especially if you have big hands or fingers. It's a little awkward to type on. It is very portable. It's a clamshell, which is good for protecting the screen and all that. So I don't know, maybe this and the Biak are kind of tied for portability in a way, because this has the keyboard with it. It is smaller, I'm sure, than the Traveler, but this has an LCD screen and it's backlit. It's not e-paper. Apparently, it's got quite good battery life, and the keyboard. It's kind of mushy apparently, and it's small. It has a menu key where you can select things. I don't know. I'm not sure about this one. I think I'll see how I like the Biak. Maybe I'll end up getting this, but it's expensive. It's like, with all the tariff nonsense, it's like $550 or something. I guess this is my hobby. $550. This is my hobby now. I've turned into a typewriter and electronic typewriter collector person. So anyway, I kind of have the feeling I might get this at some point, but I'm not sure if I would actually like it. It seems like like if the keyboard were bigger, I would actually rather a bigger device with a decent keyboard. Otherwise, it actually seems reasonable. Like it seems like something you could edit on. I'm not sure. I think it maybe is a little too small for me. I've got big hands. All right. Yeah, we'll come back to the other links. So those are all the devices that I either have and have been using, or are going to arrive, or I'm thinking about. There are some other distraction-free devices. I'm not going to get into those right now that I've looked at. So far, none of them really strike me as that great. Of course, there's pencils and paper and fountain pens and all that. Like, I like my fountain pen. I think I've said it before. I've right now settled on a Platinum Century 3776 with, I think it's medium nib size. with platinum carbon black ink. That's what I've been using. I like that a lot. I did get a bunch of fancy pencils from Japan and Japanese pencil sharpeners. The pencil sharpeners are really cool. The pencils are kind of cool. I haven't gotten into them. I don't know what. I don't know what it is about it, but I just don't. And I've noticed for other people, like they get excited by the FreeWrites, for example, or they like the fountain pens. No one's gotten excited about any of the pencils, no matter how how fancy or exotic. They like the pencil sharpeners, but the pencils, no one cares. It's like, it's just a pencil. It's kind of right. Kind of how I feel about it. I'm just not that excited about pencils. It doesn't give me, like, I guess a lot of this is I'm trying very hard to sort of get myself psyched up about wanting to write all the time. And I think that's part of why so many programmers are into mechanical keyboards and all sorts of keyboards. And I was reading Slow Horses, the Slow Horses novel, which I really liked. And it talks about this one guy who's like a computer hacker. And at one point he gets disgusted and he throws like his old, soda container into a pile of broken keyboards or whatever, right? That's like, yeah, that's kind of right. But I think that's part of it is like, if I'm going to program or write or whatever, I want to have a really nice keyboard because I'm going to be using it. And I want to have something where it's sort of just like the pleasure of using the keyboard. It was like the IBM Selectric 2, that machine was so awesome to type on that it just made me want to use it. And I was thinking about an analogy on the Macintosh. There was on the classic Mac operating system, the Mac OS 6 or 7 or whatever. There was Lightspeed's Pascal. Think's Lightspeed Pascal, I think it was what it's called. And Semantic eventually bought it and kind of ruined it. But that IDE was still my favorite of all time. I love the integrated development environment, and like the whole thing, would run on my 1 megabyte Mac. The compiler, all the tools, the IDE, all that, the debugger, and the software that you're running, everything, like the code, the program you're running, it easily fit on 1 megabyte. And I just liked starting up the software. It just made me feel like, okay, now I got to build something, I just got that feeling. So that's this feeling for me of having like a really nice mechanical keyboard or having like an IBM Selectric 2 or something like that. And I think it's the same thing with the fountain pen. When I've got a really nice fountain pen and really good paper, I just want to write. I just like get excited. I get excited every day because I got my journal, my Hobonichi Techo, Japanese daily journal, and I get to write every day into it. And it's got really nice, I think, Tomoe River paper that's like buttery smooth under the fountain pen. It's just like the physical act of writing is so pleasurable that I just want to do that. I just want, I just enjoy it. And it has this tactile sense that I love. So to me, these writing adjacent devices are, typewriter adjacent and typewriters themselves, that's part of it. It's like, I've got all these devices now. And it's like, well, how many can you use at once? Well, only one. However, at the same time, it's sort of like fountain pens, right? Like people who get into fountain pens don't own one fountain pen. They have several or a lot. And I went through a bunch of fountain pens, and now I've got one I really like, and the nib size I really like. And I just use it a ton. I just write with it literally every day. And the same with these writing devices. I get the sense that like I'll just use them though for different purposes. Like the electric typewriter I can use for certain tasks, and I've got a sense of what that works for. But I can't use it at night if people are sleeping or if someone's trying to watch a TV show. in the next room or something. It's just too loud. So I can't use that. There are times where, maybe I need a beater device that, I don't have to worry about recharging or anything like that. Just grab the Neo2 and go. Maybe with the LED light, all those sorts of things. So anyway, I just have like a bunch of different devices, and I'll probably gravitate to a couple that I spend most of my time on. Maybe I'll get rid of the others. I don't know, but yeah, that's what I was thinking about. So writing. Okay, so what am I working on? So I've been writing lots of little things, letters, personal letters, just notes to myself, ideas, thoughts about game design, whatever. But another thing I've been working on, so I've been working on what I'm calling notes, let's say, for a course. And the course has to do with mini-Canron and relational programming. What a shock. But with the emphasis on programming language stuff, sort of programming language theory seen from a relational standpoint. And I've come back to this theme over and over again. I've actually wanted to do this for at least 15 years. I think longer than that. And I've poked around at it, but I'm working on it like way more intensely than I've ever done before. And I'm making some progress. But it's also interesting because I've tried working on it, and then I get like stuck and I get frustrated and just like not work on it for a few days, or maybe think about it or write notes to myself about why I think I'm stuck. And then usually I would like throw the whole thing away. It's like, well, this isn't working. And at first I was like, okay, I'm just spinning my wheels. But now I've come to the conclusion, well, I'm trying very hard to work on it. And when I'm getting stuck on real things. Like these are things where it's like I'm tied too closely to a book on programming languages, or I'm tied too closely to the functional way to do things. I need to kind of try again thinking more relationally, or thinking more mini-Canron-wise, or whatever, or bringing more of my perspective, or more of the mini-Canron or relational perspective. So when I write a draft and throw it away, which I've done several times now, it's not like I've given up on the project. It's more like, I got to reorient a little bit. And I've gone through that a few times now. So I feel like I'm on a good path. I might adjust some more. But it feels like I have a lot to write about, and I am writing a lot. So, and I'm writing, every day I'm working on this. So nothing else. I feel motivated to do it. Are they notes? Are they a book? Are they a course? Kind of all of them. I mean, ultimately I want a book. But right now it's sort of in the form of notes for a course, which is a classic way in academia for a book to come out. The part of the story about this is I told a friend that I was working on this sort of thing, and she said, "Oh, well, if you tell me more about it, then I'm working with students for this kind of mini course, or like sort of a summer schoolish type thing. Maybe be possible to use this or something like that." So I don't know if that'll happen or not, but that was enough to kind of get me excited about it. Whether or not that happens, or whether or not this kind of mutates into something where that wouldn't be appropriate for what she wants to do. In either case, I'm using that as kind of a way to guide myself. As far as the writing and editing cycle, just the pragmatics. I've talked about this a little bit. I've written initial drafts on a FreeWrite device. I've written first I started with the Neo2. That was a while ago. I kind of didn't go very far with that version. I guess every time I've done an initial draft, I've had a new device. Maybe I'll have to do on the typewriters now. Well, anyways, I did a draft on the smart typewriter, that big FreeWrite. And that one was tied to a programming language's book. It was sort of like, okay, take this functional book and then relationalize it, make it all a mini Canvas. And I went through kind of all of the core parts of the book, including writing all the code in the FreeWrite without running it. And I ended up with about 32 pages by the end after I'd done a little editing in Emacs and all that. It was enough of a beginning where, yeah, I could have turned that into notes to myself, at least for a course or like a summer school or something. But I felt more and more uncomfortable. It's like, yeah, it's a little too close to the functional stuff and a little too close to this book. And some of the functional stuff doesn't really match what I want to do or doesn't really match miniCanvas very well. So I ended up kind of punting on a bunch of parts of it. And I thought, well, maybe I'll bring in parts of this other programming book as well, programming languages book. So it sort of turned into a draft on 2 books kind of combined. And once again, that other book is functional. It's like, yeah, it's just kind of not working. But going through that exercise of trying to convert these functional programming language books into relational made me think hard about what I care about, what I think is interesting about relational programming. And eventually when I started over again, which I started again on that FreeWrite, the FreeWrite Traveler, the little one, I was kind of disgusted with myself that I felt like I was spinning my wheels again. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, but I don't want to be tied to those books. And also I don't want to be tied to the functional perspective. I don't want everything to be a reaction to functional programming. I want to do the relational part. And also there was sort of an assumption that the reader had read these 2 other functional programming books. Yeah, I didn't like that. So anyway, I'm starting over again. I've been working on the new version of this book, or the notes, or what do you want to call it, for a few days. So the initial draft was on a FreeWrite device, and then I converted it, I moved over the file to a TXT file to my Mac, edited on Emacs, typeset in LaTeX in a very simple way, like very, very minimal typesetting. Like, okay, it's okay to say this is a section, but I'm not doing anything fancy. It'd be very easy for me to convert this to Pandoc or something. I could do it in Pandoc. I'm just so used to LaTeX that, the Pandoc can come later when I'm ready to share it. And I want to make it more accessible or put it in the web form or whatever, all those things. So Pandoc's great, nothing wrong with Pandoc, but right now I'm just doing what I'm most comfortable with. I can do like LaTeX in my sleep at this point. Pandoc, I had to okay, let me see how this works. Forget it. And then once I had the LaTeX version, I was able to print out the PDF and then edit on paper with my fountain pen, which I like writing with, even though it's on, copy paper is not the same. But mark up those papers, mark up the printout, and then use my laptop in a very disciplined way, like I was talking about before, to enter all my edits. So, and I haven't been using WordStar. I talked about this before, but George R.R. Martin uses WordStar 4. Science fiction writers talk about WordStar 7 or whatever. You can get these things and run them under, was it DOSBox X or whatever on the Mac. I'd played around with that. I just found it kind of awkward, personally. I see why people like it. Like if you were using an old IBM compatible PC and you had like a printer hooked up to it or whatever, that would actually be pretty nice. And certainly if you would use that for a long time. But I found like the FreeWrite even better. And, I just know LaTeX so well that it's not like I'm a super, super LaTeX user. It's just like the core stuff. I don't have to think about it. It's like Scheme or something, like Core Scheme or Core miniCanvas. It's not something I have to, it just sort of gets out of the way. With WordStar, I didn't find that at all. I found it's sort of awkward sort of in the same way that if I was going from WordStar to Emacs and LaTeX, I'm sure I'd have found that very awkward as well. Also, I'm not using my distraction-free writing account on my MacBook Pro. So I set up the special account just for writing. It's supposed to be distraction-free on my MacBook Pro, and I can it's a will writing account, and I can do fast user switching to switch into it, all that. I haven't really been using that because part of it is because of fast user switching. I'm just one fast user switching away from YouTube and disaster. So, like if I'm super focused, like the editing stuff I was talking about, entering the edits that are on paper where I'm at the dining room table, I don't need the distraction-free writing account. I guess if I'm relying on the distraction-free writing account to save my attention, I'm in trouble. Like I'm much better off at that point either working entirely on paper or working with one of these distraction-free devices. I just, it was too low friction to get back into trouble, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. For the LaTeX typesetting, originally I got into I want to make it a book at some point. So why don't I just typeset as a book? Part of the problem with typesetting a book in LaTeX is that the default book template or document class or document style is uses a lot of space. So I ended up with this 41-page LaTeX document. It's wow, I already got 41 pages, but they're almost always I came up with the title of a chapter, and the chapter takes up 2 pages, and there's just the title there. So it was using an enormous amount of space, and if I want to print out hard copies, enormous amount of paper. So instead I went back to the article class, and I sort of compressed everything. So 41 pages went back to 6 pages, and it was all compact and nice for editing also. So that's what I'm doing. Trying not to run any code yet that can turn into a video game or research project for me very, very easily. That happened, kind of the last time I got into this. I was saying that there are 2 programming languages books. For one of them, I thought, okay, well, I'll write about the relational view of this one book, and I immediately got sucked down the rabbit hole of trying to do something with De Bruijn indices, how do you say it, variables without names, where you use numbers instead of names, and trying to do that in a really clever way in Minicanron. And that sort of turned into a research project, and I never actually did any writing, so I got to be careful of that. So that's another thing about the distraction-free writing tools or typewriter or whatever. You're not going to be able to run the code. So you really focus on the writing. So I like that. So I talked about this, how to avoid distraction, turn off the Wi-Fi, kitchen table, listen to local music. So, when I say I listen to local music on my MacBook Pro, what I mean is do not connect. I do not connect to the internet. I do not listen to things on, Spotify. I don't do Spotify anyway, or YouTube or whatever. No, all the music has to be local. And I'm back into CDs and all that for my music anyway. Print out a hard copy once a day. I haven't done that today. I need to do that. Save to USB thumb drive once per day. That was another thing. It's technology had kind of forgotten existed. It's I don't want to upload. I had been uploading drafts to GitHub and all that, but it's once again, corporate surveillance and training AI models on whatever. It's I don't want any of that, and I don't want GitHub going down or whatever their update to their privacy policy is today or whatever. It's no, I'll just put it on a thumb drive. Okay. Even that's kind of annoying because my thumb drive requires the stupid dongle to adapt to make it fit into, USB-C. So I've got this like $90 dongle or whatever it is. It's probably not $90, but it's like a very expensive dongle hanging off this USB key to back up things. Sorry, I think I tapped the mic. Edit on paper first. That's very important. Keep the printouts for posterity, comparison, and motivation. Yeah, so that's another decision I've made is, I'm printed out every day and keep that around. And I've also kept some of the printouts from when I was going down a different direction. Something about that's motivating. I can see like the dates. I can see, okay, I'm working on this every day. And sometimes I kind of get stuck, but then I get unstuck. So I'm making progress. And yeah. Online course, like I said, I've been thinking about doing an online course. So these notes, which hopefully will someday turn into a book. I mean, by someday, I'm not talking like in the year 2100. I'm talking, in the relatively near future. Hopefully it will start looking book-like. But, these are effectively course notes right now, sort of for myself, which I'll talk about in a second. I might try doing something again with online version of this, like maybe once solo where I just go through things and make videos, and then once with other people. I'm not sure. Or maybe the other order. I just don't know. Working on the notes a little every day, so it's not a binge writing thing. I'm just trying to do a little bit every day. So the way I'm thinking about this, and Stephen King has this idea, and he talks about in his book On Writing, which I really like, of a first reader. So his first reader is his wife, first person to look at a draft. And I apologize to all the people that I've shown terrible drafts to, like terrible, incomplete, messy things. I apologize. I'm trying really hard to not do that anymore. But at some point I'll have to show this to someone else. So in my mind right now, my first reader is probably this friend who's talking about doing this sort of summer schoolish thing. So that's my first reader in my head. But I'm actually not writing for this person yet. They're sort of my second audience. My first audience, where I'm just trying to get a first rough draft down, is myself, imagining myself as if I were to teach this summer school or the YouTube online video or online course or however it is. So just like notes to myself. So that means that they don't have to be super complete in terms of complete sentences and paragraphs and explanations of everything, but they have to capture the essence. They have to capture the main ideas, the main pieces of code, the logical development, the ordering of things, the dependencies and all that, if I were to teach a summer school. And I've taught a couple of summer schools on mini-Kenrin and relational programming before, so it's not too much of a stretch for me to imagine this. So that's sort of what I think of first. It's like, these have to be notes to myself. And I want complete notes, even if they're not super polished and they're missing some things that I could easily fill in, that's fine. I'll just kind of keep filling them in as I go. But like, I would want like kind of the outline for the course and, sort of what material is really essential and what's kind of optional and all that. And then the second sort of more cleaned up version, I think, is for my friend who might actually teach the course, right? So like I wouldn't be teaching the course probably, it'd be my friend. So it has to be much more polished for someone else to do it. But this is someone who knows programming languages really well and knows mini-Kenrin to at least some extent. So it doesn't have to be as polished and complete as for the like for a student, let's say, who's never seen any of this. But it still has to be way more filled in and polished than for me, like if I were to teach it. And then the next stage after that is maybe for a teaching assistant working with my friend. Maybe they know programming languages theory fairly well, but maybe the mini Canron stuff I need to, and then the students who haven't seen maybe any of this stuff. Okay. And so that's kind of how I'm thinking of it. And I'm really trying to focus on kind of the whole thing end to end as like a course or a book, as opposed to what I tend to do is like, all right, I get this idea for this grand thing, and then I really polish, the first 3 pages of it, and then I get tired of it or lose interest or get disgusted by how bad it looks or whatever and abandon it, move on to something else. So I'm trying to avoid that very much and do sort of like a low fidelity version, and then sort of, I guess it's sort of like the stable diffusion type process. I imagine it's kind of like filling in the blanks in multiple passes like this. So, yeah. You know what? Well, okay. Well, here are the 2 books. I wrote it down. Been mysterious. YAPL 3, Essentials of Programming Languages 3, and Types in Programming Languages. So originally I was doing Essentials of Programming Languages, sort of relational style. So I've got a bunch of notes on that. And I'd also done a bunch of stuff with TAPL, and then started merging them. But once again, it's like those are both basically from a functional standpoint. And the topics that they address, while all reasonable and they're both good books, they're not really, I think, the essential parts from like the mini Canron or relational standpoint. That like there are other issues that come up when you're doing things relationally than when you're doing things functionally that are important to address. And there's also just a different perspective of things. So, I started YAPL 3 base and before TAPL base, and then I was trying to combine them. I was like, nah, it needs to be its own thing. So, yeah, so September 1st is my internal deadline for having something in a shape for the first reader. Distraction-free writing devices seem to be very helpful. And what I should say there was for first drafts. Yeah. So for just generating text, the distraction-free writing devices seem excellent. For editing, forget it. At least the ones I have currently. And that includes the Neo2. Like there's no way to put the files back onto those devices. And you can put the files back on the Japanese device, the Pomera, is my understanding. There is a way to put the files back on. Maybe you can do some editing on this one. I don't know. That one I'm not sure about yet. But for the other devices that I have, I don't know about the Biak either. For the other devices I have, there's not really a way to put things back into it other than type. So that's just not, they're for free writing. They're for generating drafts. Maybe some very light editing when you first start out with that first draft. Yeah, so fountain pens, fancy pencils, nice paper, all that. Fancy pencils are like a bust. How fancy is kind of pencil be? You can get into mechanical pencils and all that, and drafting and all that, and I've been into that. Yeah, I don't know. I like my fountain pens. Very picky about the fountain pens. Like I think the key mistake I made first was getting some cheap fountain pens. They were like a little too cheap. But then when I started getting the nicer fountain pens, I got fountain pens with nibs that were too fine. Like I was getting in the Japanese fountain pens and I wanted to write kanji and stuff. It's like, oh, let me get the smallest nib possible. And then it's like super scratchy and has all these issues. So now it's like, yeah, I still like the Japanese pens, but I'm trying to get bigger nibs. And right now I'm pretty happy with the Platinum Centuries 3776 with I think it's the medium nib. But I had like a extra fine nib and it was just too too small. Nice papers, nice, yeah. Like I was saying, I really like the Hobonichi Techo for daily writing. Yeah, cool. I've been training myself, to write and to want to write. And a lot of this has just been reading books like on writing. And I've just been reading a lot of books and blog posts and watching interviews with writers and all that. And I don't think any of that has made me write any better at all. Not really. But what it has done is sort of like psyched me up in some way. Or it's like or this part of myself psyching myself up in the same way as like buying a typewriter, I guess, in a way. It's like I want to write, and I have trained myself to the point now where like I can't go to sleep if I haven't written. Like I'll just like get up and start writing because I know I can't go to sleep if I haven't written some. I mean, maybe if I'm really, really exhausted, I could do it, but I'd still feel guilty. But probably I wouldn't even be able to do it. I probably would just like, no matter how tired I'd be, it's like, okay, I'll sleep 20 minutes and I'll wake up and write a little bit. So for the family vacation, during that family vacation, I didn't get as much time to write as I'd like, or I didn't make it, it was tricky to make as much time to write as I'd like. And I kind of felt that writing pressure rise. So I guess in some sense I've succeeded to a fair amount of sort of forcing myself into becoming a writer in terms of the need to write. So I'm I now have reading and writing pressure. Like I've already had this reading pressure. I just have to read or I get grumpy. And now I have writing pressure. I just like have to exercise those pretty much every day. And then, now taking care of myself and diet and exercise and all that, that's kind of its own thing. And trying to make good decisions in general. And so this is all generally good, trying to form good habits, but it's more like just a habit. I don't know how to explain it other than at some point, I mean, maybe it is just a habit, but once the habit gets ingrained enough, if you can't do it, if there's something you're supposed to do every day, or you convince yourself you're supposed to do every day, if you can't do it for a few days, like you start getting impatient and annoyed, or at least I do. So I need like my reading and writing fix. And I've seen this from a number of writers. They talk about needing to write a certain amount every day. So that other people can be around them and they can act like kind of functioning human beings. Okay. And so I definitely understand that now to at least some extent. I'm not saying I've that developed to the same extent of someone who's been a professional writer and has written 4 hours a day every day for 20 years. But I am starting to understand it. And it's interesting because really it comes down to cultivating an addiction, a psychological addiction on purpose. Because it doesn't feel like just a habit to me. I don't know. Maybe there's not that much distinction in some sense, or maybe it's just how much I want to do it. It's both. I have a habit now, and I also really want to do it. So it's like that combination, I guess. And I get frustrated when I'm not doing it. I read here's another long piece of writing, the 2-volume autobiography of Isaac Asimov. It was between the two of them pretty long, and pretty long passages of him talking about how much money he made from writing or whatever. I find it interesting because I'm interested in writing and how writers kind of became writers. But anyway, when it would be time for like the family vacation in the summer and going up into the mountains near New York City, and his wife would be like, hey, is it okay if we, let's go to the summer camp, or let's go to whatever, the summer retreat in the mountains. And Isaac Asimov would be like, okay, that sounds good. And then after a few beats, he'd be like, do you mind if I bring my typewriter? Right. So, yeah, he definitely couldn't turn that off. Now, for him, he was trained by the candy store. He grew up with his family. They owned what is called a candy store, which is like, I guess, kind of a bodega in New York City. And because they didn't have the money to hire people, he ended up working there from a very young age, and he spent all of his time working at the candy store. He'd come right home after school, work in the candy store. And he said that he ended up with this feeling that if he wasn't working or being productive, he was, being lazy, and there was something wrong. And he couldn't really turn that off, even as an adult. Even when he was successful and famous and had money from his books and all that, he couldn't turn that off. So, I guess that's the same sort of thing. Now, he didn't cultivate that. That definitely came from his father, from what I read. But I guess I'm trying to cultivate it to some extent in myself, that, I just have to write. There's this book, Bird by Bird, a very famous writing book, a different type of bird, not me. This is by Anne Lamott. And I saw an interview with her about writing, and she had a great phrase, which was, you have to stop not writing. Right. You have to stop not writing. Did I say this last time? I don't remember. Was it Anne Lamott? I don't know. I have to look this up. I think that was her exact quote. It was something very similar to this. All right, sorry, Anne. I'll look up the spelling of her name. But yeah, that was great. You have to stop not writing. So that's the feeling I have. I have to stop not writing. Okay, enough about all that. Now let's move on to some other things, other fun or interesting things that I've kind of come across. One is the Anime English Club with Sally Amaki, which is this right here. Anime English Club with Sally Amaki. You can find it on YouTube, and there are lots of kind of podcasts. If you just search for that phrase, you'll find this in lots of places, YouTube and other places. But it's basically a Japanese American voice actor who does anime voices. Has a show. She has a show where she teaches Japanese speakers English through anime. This is going through Death Note, and so she'll talk about like a scene or a phrase or characters expressing this, and she'll say this is it in Nihongo and this is it in Ego or whatever. And at first I thought she was actually teaching Japanese because it can work the other way. Other people are learning Japanese this way. And it has Japanese subtitles and stuff like that. So I think you'll learn Japanese probably just as well, if not better, than learning English. But it's just interesting. And it's also interesting to hear a voice actor go back and forth because she's fluent in English and Japanese. And, she has such vocal control. It's just very interesting. And it's interesting to hear how she speaks differently in Japanese and English. And when she's kind of doing her seiyuu voice versus her regular speaking voice. And yeah, this episode, is funny because she begins with an apology to anyone trying to learn English through this because it's so tricky. I was like, that's kind of how I feel about trying to learn Japanese. I feel like it's hard. It's hard. So anyway, that's something I've come across, which I've enjoyed. Another thing is speaking of, kind of 80s stuff. And this reminds me a little of that Paul Giamatti conversation. I came across a YouTube video talking about 80s television shows that were actually cool. And I remember this show from the 80s, although I don't think I got it. There was a show called Sledgehammer that ran from 1986 to 88. And David Rash is the star. And how to explain this? This show is sort of like if Airplane or The Naked Gun, if those parodies met like Dirty Harry. I guess The Naked Gun's a little bit like that, but like imagine much more like Dirty Harry or, the sort of like vigilante cop, who's, sort of Rambo-ish type thing. So it's very much a satirical police sitcom, largely making fun of like American gun culture and violence and all this stuff. A caricature of the cop on the edge character. Coming out in the 80s, I think a lot of people didn't get it. I didn't get it. It was actually very subversive in a lot of ways. But I've enjoyed watching this. I actually got the whole series. And let's see, David Rash as Inspector Sledgehammer. This actor, I really didn't know, but he's in some fantastic. I mean, he always gives a fantastic performance. So he was in Burn After Reading. He was a CIA guy who has an amazing conversation with J.K. Simmons. That is so funny. And then he was in this great movie called In the Loop, which is sort of a spin-off of a British political sitcom called The Thick of It, which is fantastic. And this is a fantastic movie. And he is fantastic in it. Anyway. I'm a David Rash fan now, and I've been reading about other things he's in. That he's been in. Apparently, he was a big part of Succession, like the HBO series Succession, which I only saw part of one episode of that. But it's got Brian Cox. It's got to be good. But anyway, I just have enjoyed his performances so much. He's 3 out of 3 so far for me. So the last thing I wanted to end on are kind of like some of the things I missed. I just haven't been doing as much of or as active as I'd like to be. So, in January, I did my standard beginning of the year thing where I spent maybe a week or two or a couple weeks trying to do everything at once, which always works out about as much as you would expect. I guess in some sense, it's like a filtering, function. I try a bunch of things. I see what sticks. What do I really want to do? Right now, I've been focusing very much on writing and reading and trying to take care of myself, and also just going back and exploring some kind of fun or weird things, part of my growing up in the 80s. Late 70s and 80s. Now that time period is back far enough, but I can kind of look back on it with more of a historical eye, but also just kind of like, okay, I feel like we're kind of living in the 80s part 2 in a way, or maybe the 80s was the 50s part 2, and so maybe we're living in the 50s part 3. So that I've been looking at. Things like looking at the history of Dungeons and Dragons kind of gets into that as well. But things I missed, that I haven't been doing a lot of, or I'd like to do more of. Well, I've been doing a little retro computing and retro gaming. I resurrected the Power Mac 7166 I got in 1994, which is this machine. And that was like the first generation of the Power Macs, and it had a lot of issues, but it still runs. My original Power Mac with my original 32-year-old hard drive, that all runs. And I still have a Jazz drive with 32-year-old files on it. The SCSI drive. If you've never dealt with like Power Mac 7100 SCSI stuff, good. You probably don't want to get into that business. It's not that much fun. But the Jazz drives and those Jazz disks, these are like 1 gigabyte disks. It's sort of like the bigger version of the iOmega zip drive, the iOmega Jazz drive. And they could fail sort of spectacularly. So I'm a little nervous that I've got these two 1 gigabyte drives, disks, or so I have two 1 gigabyte cartridges for the Jazz drive, and the Jazz drive could go, or the cartridges could go. The first time I had a Jazz drive, it kind of blew up within the first half an hour of using it, brand new. So I'm a little nervous about that. And because they're 1 gigabyte, and I only have a 250 megabyte hard drive, backing up is a little bit of an issue. So I got this blue SCSI emulator, this thing. So you can plug it into the SCSI port, or at the end of a chain of SCSI devices, and then you can, it's got, I guess, like a Raspberry Pi on it or something, and it pretends to be a SCSI device, and you can hook up to a SD card, and have it look like a device, so I could transfer the Jazz drive stuff. But I got to get like exactly the right cables and stuff. It's still kind of a pain. And I don't know, maybe I have the right cable somewhere in a box, but I might just get another one. And then I got this bright idea. I say, well, if I got all these kind of low distraction writing devices, maybe I could take my Power Mac 7166 and use ClarisWorks or Microsoft Word 4 and type on that, and use that sort of like using, WordStar 4 on an old MS-DOS machine. And in the past, I'd like the keyboards I love the keyboard that came with my Mac SE, for example. And I have this Apple extended keyboard with the Alps keys and all that. And I thought, okay, this will be great for typing. And it just didn't feel that well. It felt that great. So part of it is I think the keyboard's filthy. It probably needs to be like completely clean, and probably has, a bunch of Coke spilled on it, and everything's like sticky and all that. But just didn't enjoy it. Partly also maybe is because I've used so many keyboards now and electric typewriter recently. It's like, the keyboard just doesn't feel that great. So anyway, it's also just kind of, this is funky, and like, how do I get stuff off of it? So I actually bought an external USB floppy disk, so I could transfer the files via floppy disk, and I don't know. I'm not sure, but I don't think I want to write a book on that setup. Maybe, but the keyboard kind of sucked. And I think the dedicated writing devices plus my laptop seemed like a better solution right now. But for retro computing, this is cool. And it has been fun going through and looking through 32-year-old files, like in my old computer programs and video games I was writing 32 years ago. So that was fun. Yeah. Well, that's kind of a long update, but that's what I've been thinking about and what I've been doing. Hope you're doing well, and hope I can make another video soon, and hope I keep making progress on these things I'm working on. Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm not done yet. Don't go, come back. I kind of went a little out of order here. So the things I miss. So I have done some retro computing, so it's not like I totally miss it, but you know, I've got a lot of old hardware sitting around, and I'll kind of poke at it a little bit, or I'll poke at it a lot for like a day or two or three, and then I got to move it again. Part of it is just space and working on 32-year-old machines that might have issues, and you got to open up and change the batteries and stuff. Just requires like space, and you got to move these heavy machines around. So yeah, takes a little bit of time and effort and space to do it. Other things I miss. Okay, I haven't played any StarCraft for a while. I was getting back into Brood War. Yeah, StarCraft 2 is not really doing it for me. I don't know if it's the Microsoft thing or so many patches. Like there's another big patch and they changed the number of workers, but they've changed the way the game feels enough that I don't know. I like StarCraft 1, hasn't been patched in forever, and still got pretty good balance at the highest in professional level. I've been playing, a little AoE 2, Age of Empires 2, with a friend. That's fun. That game is, sort of comparable to StarCraft 1 in a lot of ways in difficulty, and sort of historic interests also as an RTS. So that part's good. I prefer StarCraft. I like the fact that Zerg and Terran and Protoss feel so different from each other. In AoE, it's like, each civilization has like slightly different feel, but they're basically otherwise completely the same. Whereas like Zerg just feels very, very different than Protoss and StarCraft. Like you just, they just feel completely different. You have to think about the play fundamentally differently. So I like that more. But anyway, that's fun. So I have gotten a little RTS action in, but I'd like to play some StarCraft. I have been playing, I've been watching lots of StarCraft videos. Yeah, I'll just throw this in. Another thing, this is kind of retro gaming, I guess. Where to put this? There's an amazing first-person shooter that came out in 2002-ish, called Neo2, No One Lives Forever 2. It's like a spoof of a 60s spy. There was Neo and Neo2, then there was Contract Jack, which most people didn't like as much. It was more serious, I guess. But Neo2 came out just when I was starting grad school. And I played a ton of that. And the servers are still running, even though they're not officially supported. People figured out or talked to the company, and no one knows who owns the rights anymore because there were so many companies involved. So, it'd be great to get like a retrofitted, remastered version of Neo2, but I don't know that will ever happen just because the rights are so unclear. But in any case, the game is great. It's very fun. It has all sorts of humor and weird mechanics, like you can throw a banana on the ground, make someone, fall, or laughing gas. You can throw laughing gas at them and stuff. So that game is fun. And people still keep the servers running after 24 years or something. Servers are still running. Played a game with my brother the other night. The sad part is no one's playing the game. So as far as I know, no one's used that server for a long time. As a couple years ago, people claimed that they were playing on Sundays, but I haven't seen anyone on the servers. So, yeah, if anyone wants to play Neo2, maybe we can get a group of people. But that's something that would be fun to revive. It's a great game. It reminds me a lot of the StarCraft or Age of Empires or any of these other classic games. It's obviously not being patched or anything like that. It used to be very active. It could be active again. It's just that, it's one of those games that requires, it's a stone soup story, right? Like, you have to have a couple people on the server. If there were like 2 people on the server, then other people can join. But when you look at the server and there's 0 people, that doesn't really work. So anyway, I'm trying to think, is there a way to bootstrap interest in that game for people playing it? I know that there are people interested in like fixing the software, getting modern computers to run. People play it single player still. It's got a great single player, but it'd be fun to do multiplayer. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. Maybe we can get a group together. Japanese, that's something I miss. I still listen to Japanese VTubers or watch Japanese videos lots of times, but I'm not actively studying it. I'd like to get back into it. It just requires attention. It's the same like playing StarCraft. It just like just requires like effort and attention. And I've been spending that on other things. Learning physics. Every once in a while I'll go through a kick and read a lot about physics, watch a lot of videos and stuff. So, I mean, it's not like I'm not doing any of these things, but I haven't been doing them as intensely over a long period of time as, compared to, say, writing and reading. You say, well, I could read a bunch of physics books, but once again, that just requires a lot of attention, I find. And doing electronics. I've got a bunch of electronic stuff right next to me. I'm touching the oscilloscope, power supply, signal generator. Got all these components next to me. It's all designed to be within my arm's reach. And I just not doing any of it. Once again, just requires attention. So, not sure. I guess the bootstrapping of the writing is just taking so much of my energy. And I just don't want to let that one slip. One thing I'm curious about is, like, I think it actually will. I think I will reach the point where I have modified the way I think about the writing and come up with a way of writing that works, where it won't require the same energy for me to keep writing. I think it's sort of like programming. When I was first learning to program, it just required a lot of kind of effort to do something. Now it's like riding a bike or something. I can program in my head in Minikenrin or Scheme. Or like type into one of these portable devices. Like I don't, like a writing adjacent device, or I could program on a typewriter. Like that's fine, or pencil or paper. It just doesn't require the same level of effort than when I was starting, or when I was like learning logic programming or Minikenrin or whatever. So maybe that will happen with the writing, and then I can, pick up one of these things. But like learning to really play StarCraft on ladder, where I can play competitively against these people who've been playing for 25 years or longer, like that's hardcore. Or, trying to level up my Japanese. So every once in a while I think about the things that I'm not doing. But I am writing, so, it's like the Firefly pilot. If you ever watch Firefly, where at the end of the episode. It's like spoiler. One guy is asking Malcolm Reynolds, the new doctor who's on the ship. Well, they have this whole exchange, which I won't get into, but at the end, he's like, "Are you always so, or are you always in such a good mood, or whatever? Or you're always so cheerful or positive or whatever?" And Malcolm Reynolds' character says, "Well, I've had a good day." And the guy's like, "You've been shot. 2 other people on the ship have been shot. All these things have happened." And he's like, "We're still flying." Right? The spaceship is still flying. And the doctor says, "That's not much." And he says, "That's enough." Right? That's kind of how I feel right now with the writing. That's enough. If I get my writing done, get my reading done, taking care of myself, right now, that's enough. So maybe that's what it's like to get into a writerly way. Not sure. Oh, anyway, I am writing. I'm writing every day, and at some point I'll finish something. That's the next part. I got to learn how to finish it. But step 1 is like learning how to write. It's like day 9 says, you want to write a book. The dumbest but most essential thing is like you just have to enter text somehow. Right? You have to like type it or write it. Like you have to be writing words and sentences and paragraphs and all that. I'm doing that now. Sometimes I throw it all away, but I am doing it, and I seem to be getting somewhere. So, yeah, as long as I keep doing that every day, I'm good to go. Alrighty. Okay, that's it for real. Okay, thank you. Have a good one. Hope to talk to you soon.